So a lot of people online in Facebook groups, in chats, in Twitter, and news articles, and the conversation around comic books right now is how soon before we can return to normal. And the answer is we're not returning to normal, which is kind of a scary statement. Unless you really absolutely loved how normal was in every way, and you don't want to ever leave that. But chances are that's not you. But let's talk a little bit about what return to normal means and how we're supposed to feel about it. Hey everybody, this is Perch. We talk about returning to normal for comics. We talk about returning to normal for a lot of things, not just comics. That's where the world's at right now. People are wondering, when can we return to normal? It seems like we should be able to return to normal, but there's still a disease out there. We're supposed to stay home, but how much longer is this supposed to go on? What about, going to restaurants? What about going to stores? And it's one interesting thing about all this I haven't heard discussed much is this is going to serve as a bit of a reset for people, primarily in the big metropolitan areas who had gotten used to, say, just going out to eat. I have a friend who does not, they keep basically I go over to their little condo and they've got the bare essentials, what I would call, beer. I'm not sure I want to start with that as a bare essential, but they got some cereal, some milk, some water, some beer, occasionally some fruit, and that's about it. That's what they keep on hand. Their refrigerator is bare, and they don't see a need to have more. And I asked, hey, do the guy says I haven't turned on my stove in like 6 months. They just don't. When it's time to get some dinner, they go out and they go out to the restaurant down the street, or they go out to fast food, and that's a lot of people. And what this is doing, what this pandemic is doing, is resetting people a little bit. That this kind of on demand, I can go out, I can just get food whenever I want. That habit is going away. You're going to have to kind of fend for yourself. You're going to have to kind of reintroduced with the grocery store or with the stove and all the rest. And that's part of the not returning to normal. But you could argue that that normal wasn't a good normal anyway. That people were, need to be self-sufficient, need to be able to cook their own food, need to maybe have plans that are more than just a day or two. I think there's always been that worry. So how does this fit for comics? Well, there were some aspects of, quote unquote normal that were not healthy, like single source distribution from Diamond. A lot of people liked it because they only had to go to one place. They didn't really have to think about it. They could, if they're frustrated over something coming into their shop, they have one place to get frustrated with, Diamond. And if you have multiples, then you've got to, deal with that complexity. A lot of people didn't like complexity. Another kind of normal was this pattern we'd slipped into where, people would complain about it, these constant events, but at the same time, shops had acclimated around them. That was how they planned and made their money. And even consumers like, I don't like this event, but I'm going to just stop buying, Marvel comics except for the events. It's like, well, wait a minute, you said you didn't like the events, now you're just buying the events, and so there's a lot of kind of things going on like that. And I think some of the abnormal things we had seen, like comics getting relaunched before 12 issues were out. Again, we complained about it, but it had slipped into becoming just the way business was done. And a lot of these approaches do not work if you do not have this kind of on demand system. Now you might say to yourself, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. What is stores closing or stores opening up in a limited way? What does it have to do with events? What does it have to do with relaunches? Those are two different things. But they're really not, because the comic book model for shops and for consumers had kind of reformed to, you go to your comic shop, you think about Marvel as kind of a big blob. There's Marvel. And then you think of, maybe you think of X-Men within Marvel, and you're like, I'll take the X-Men titles. And if you talk to a shop owner, it's not uncommon to hear them say things like, oh, customers would come in, pull box customer, and say, I want all the Avengers books, or I just want the X-Men books. And so to respond to that, the publisher would, just pump out kind of, whatever it happens to be, Secret Empire, X-Men, or Empire with a Y is too many empires. Secret Empire Invasion. I don't know. Anyway, you just get these kind of books that are tossed out that fit vaguely within the family. They're not expected to have longevity to them because who needs longevity? It's really just designed to, in you go, out you go kind of model of consuming comics. You didn't think about the titles as much. You just thought about, I'm getting the X-Men family. I'm getting the Avengers family. That's what I'm doing. So that part of the world is disrupted when people can't just go into shops, look at a shelf, see, a bunch of Marvel stuff every week and have that weekly, I'm going to the comic shop and I'm going to pick up my DC books or my Marvel books or whatever it happened to be. That tends to break down when you can't go into a shop regularly, when maybe you're a little bit more suspicious of going to the shop, or if you're looking at your money more closely. And that's the big part of the won't return to normal that we're going to deal with here is people are looking at their money a lot more closely. So they're not just going to say, subscribe me to all the X-Men books. They're going to say, well, subscribe me to the core X-Men books. And that cuts out, depending on your point of view, anywhere from 50% to 90% of them. So this is going to change things in terms of what the new normal is like. But I go back to kind of my premise. Some of that's for the best. No, part of changing the new normal is not, all the comics I don't like with the quote unquote social justice stuff goes away automatically. No, I think that if the comics and the content sells, and this is where things get, conflated together, is you look at a book and you say, all right, we've got an unknown artist on this. We've got a writer on this who's on 8 other books. So, the attention may be, not 100% here. And it's got no marketing. It's coming out the gate with very little push, and it happens to feature some very kind of like social justice topics. This new Warriors book with safe space and whatever the other one was. Anyway, that stuff, screen time. You got these kinds of characters that feel like a cliche. It's easy for people to do videos, and I did a review of this book, and I got kind of some mixed opinions on it. It's easy to look at that and go, well, this product is going to sell. This comic is going to sell or fail because it's cringy. It's got these social justice topics, and nobody wants that. And that may or may not be true. But what is definitely true is if you put an unknown writer and artist on it, if you give it no marketing, you give it no attention, you kind of shove it out the door with 60 other books, it's not going to sell well. It doesn't matter. You could have and this is kind of the counter to a lot of those social justice, our automatic poison books. Maybe elements of those are. It's hard to tell. But they're often wrapped up with a bunch of other silliness that is definitely, we know, is the culprit. So if you took a book and you had the same creative team of New Warriors, same writer, same artist, same marketing push, same price tag, same everything else, except the book was 80s action, whatever that stereotype is. There's a girl in a bikini and she has to be rescued somewhere, and a guy has got muscles and a shark, and he can ride around on a surfboard and go rescue her. Is that the opposite of a social justice? I'm not sure I've got that nailed down. At any rate, my point is, what's going to tank it are all those other things. I doubt that book would sell better. It's just these topics in many cases are so outlandish that people fixate on those and they miss the other pieces. So as we go into what does the new normal look like, I wouldn't expect for suddenly Marvel or DC or these big companies to go, what, from now on we're doing manly books, no more social justice topics. We're just going to do straight up superhero action. They're likely not going to do that because the editors and the writers and their talent pool is still the same people. But what they are likely to do is maybe not shove so many of them out onto the shelves where they have no prayer of getting marketed properly or actually released. Maybe you start looking at going, okay, well, if budgets are tightening and people aren't going to buy as many books, several of these titles that are unknowns are not going to get green lights. Maybe if we have this super top selling book, Spider-Man, we're not going to do a big storyline where Peter Parker determines he's bisexual or something like that, because we know that's going to potentially isolate the audience, and right now we need that audience. I think that you'll see some of those decisions start to come into play, But a lot of those are based more on kind of the talent pool and the financials than whether or not social justice topics are good or bad. I just, in my opinion, I don't know if I'm making my case very well here as I'm hearing it come out of my mouth, but I think the key there is it's easy to get distracted with different things, and most importantly, as we return to normal, normal will need to have a new definition. Normal will need to be different. I will say as a very strong prediction that if Marvel, for example, it's the curfew is lifted. If the stores are open back up again, okay, Diamond's ready to go. We can print, we can ship things off, and everything is perfect. If Marvel's like, all right, let's get all those people we furloughed back. Here we go. Week number 1, here's 60 books, and week number 2, here's another 50 books, and same price tag, same creative team, same storylines. It's like you fell asleep for 4 months, and we're right back to where we were. If that's what they do, I think that is going to fall very hard on its face because people are not returning to comics in the same state as when they left it. Things have shifted. You take a look at what DC is doing right now, where they rewrote bits of Dark Metal to kind of align first of all to Didio's firing, but then also kind of this pause in production and all the rest. So there's been, and whatever happens to G5 and kind of all these different areas, DC is adjusting. If Marvel's just like, all right, we're going out the gate like we were, then they run a good chance. So one of two things are happening. Either people are going to look at that and go, oh, thank goodness you're back. Hooray, everybody buy comics. But that wasn't exactly the state they left it in. And what's more likely is that people are going to come back and go, oh, after some time apart, yeah, some of these things just they're not worth $4.99, and I'm gonna buy 2 less books, and there's going to need to be some changes. More likely, that's what we're in for. Anyway, what do you think? What's the new normal for comics? Where are we headed? Where should we head? And what are some things that kind of are on your mind that say, what, when everything's back, quote unquote, to normal, I really hope these two things are different. That this part of the psychology has changed and where it's all at. And did my point make any sense on kind of how social issues it gets an abnormal amount of focus, but it masks other problems that are probably have a more direct impact to the bottom line, like the creative teams and like some of the pay that's going on and like some of the constant relaunches. That do you agree with that point? Do I need to make it differently, better? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Introduce to a friend if you don't mind. That would be always very appreciated. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Recommend different topics. I always really appreciate it when you do. But most of all, thanks for listening.